Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another deck tech and our first Pokemon TCG deck tech, and I'm really excited to talk about the newest version of Paldean Tauros. So Paldean Tauros was a deck that came out in Phantasmal Flames with the namesake card Paldean Tauros, and we got a new Tauros in Chaos Rising that I really think is going to help the consistency of this one prize deck. So there's two new cards that we got in Chaos Rising that's really going to help this deck. The first one obviously is Tauros. We'll talk about special red card in a second here, but this Tauros I think is going to be really, really good. So it just requires 2 energy of any kind. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and flip a coin for each of your Pokemon in play that has Tauros in its name. This attack does 50 damage to the chosen Pokemon for each heads. So what we're trying to do is load up our bench with a bunch of Tauros, which is already what we're trying to do, and then we can have a pretty solid attack from, a basic one prize Pokemon. Obviously, it's a little bit inconsistent in the terms, it is a coin flip, right, with all of our Tauros cards, but I really think that this is going to be a very nice backup attacker in this deck. And the special red card, a lot of people are saying special red card is going to be nuts, and the card is very, very good, and we'll kind of talk about why we're also playing it in a little bit here, just because it's going to be easier for us to grab this card, but special red card is definitely a very, very good card. So those are the new Chaos Rising cards that we're playing, but let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the deck. So obviously what we're trying to do with the main strategy here is use Paldean Tauros. Raging Charge, 1 fighting energy. This attack does 40 damage for each of your Pokemon that has Tauros in its name that has any damage counters on it. So the best ways in our deck to put damage counters on our Tauros is Risky Ruins, the Stadium. This card's nuts. Whenever a player puts a basic non-dark type Pokemon onto their bench during their turn, place 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So ideally what we're trying to do is start with this Stadium in play on our first turn, and then put a whole bunch of Tauros cards in play. They all get damage counters on them, and then we can start attacking for a crazy amount of damage. We also have 2 copies of Team Rocket's Venture Bomb, which is in a way kind of a win-win card. We flip a coin. If heads, put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If tails, put 2 damage counters on one of your active Pokemon. So depending on the situation, it could be good to hit heads or tails, but largely it's going to be beneficial for us either way, which is pretty sweet. Team Rocket's Venture Bomb, not a card that basically anybody plays, but in this deck, it can be very, very important. The main reason you would want the Venture Bomb is because if we lead with like a Paldean Tauros, for instance, or a regular Tauros, we're going to want to be able to put damage counters on it, because ideally, turn 1, we're going to have a Tauros in play, and it won't have any damage counters on it. So this is a way to put additional damage counters on our Tauros that already don't have them. So the card is very, very good. But let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the cards in here. Let's talk about the Pokemon. Obviously, 4 Paldean Tauros and 4 regular Tauros. Obviously, we want to put as many of these as we can into play. I did forget to mention the last Tauros we were using in this deck was the Destined Rivals Tauros, which really was not a great attacker, just in general. It kind of just sat on the bench, but at least this Tauros, we can do something with it, which is pretty sweet. But the other Pokemon that we're playing in this deck, we're just playing 1 Pheasantipity EX and then 1 Psyduck. Pheasantipity is pretty straightforward. We get to draw some cards when our Tauros get knocked out. And then Psyduck is really just to kind of hate on Dragapult a little bit. I know that not all Dragapult lists are playing the Dust Noir build, but I still think having Psyduck is still pretty worth it, just because those the Dust Noir version of Dragapult can be really, really fast and take out our Tauros very, very easily. So I still think that this card is definitely worth playing, just in general. But let's go and talk about the rest of the cards. We're also playing a whole bunch of different items. Our ace spec of choice is Secret Box, which makes sense, I think, in a deck like this, right? We want to be able to get a Stadium in play right away. And then there's a whole bunch of other cards that we can grab that are really, really good for our strategy, which obviously with items, we have a lot of really, really important items that we need to play in this deck. You could also play Precious Trolley, but I think it's better just because we want to make sure we're getting Risky Ruins in as quickly as possible. So I definitely think Secret Box is the way to go, at least for the ace spec in this deck. Then we're also playing 4 Fighting Gongs and 4 Pokepads, which obviously they help grab our Tauros. We're also playing the 2 special red cards that I mentioned before, 2 Pokegear 3.0s, as well as 4 Night Stretchers in this deck. I really like the Pokegear 3.0s in this deck. I think it's nice, having additional cards that help us dig for our good supporters as opposed to just playing a bunch of filler supporters. I feel like that makes sense just in general. So big fan of the Pokegears. And then the last bit of items that we're playing 4 Premium Power Pro, which obviously works very well with our Paldean Tauros. We're playing 1 copy of Switch in the 2 Rockets Team Rockets Venture Bomb. I keep trying to mispronounce that. I really do like the Switch in this deck as just a nice one-of. I know that I've played against like the Absol decks, and then they try to like Yveltal clutch us, and then I can use Secret Box to grab our switch, you know, our Paldean Tauros in or whatever they decide to trap, and then we can go ahead and get a knockout, which is pretty darn sweet in this deck. So, the next cards that we're playing a couple tools, not too many. We're playing 2 Air Balloons and 2 Brave Bangle. I really like the Air Balloons in this deck because it really helps us pivot into the correct Tauros that we want to be able to attack with. I also really like the Brave Bangle because with our Paldean Tauros, we're trying to do a lot of damage, and using a tool that helps us do additional damage in addition to the Premium Power Pros are pretty sweet. So we can really, you know, realistically one-shot a lot of different EX Pokemon, which is very good in our single prize deck. So let's go and talk about the supporters now. We're not playing really that many supporters. We're playing 4 Lily's Determination and 4 Team Rocket's Petrol. Lily's Determination obviously is one of the best supporters in the entire format. Team Rocket's Petrol does one thing and one thing only, and that is to help grab Secret Box. Obviously, late game, you know, we can grab really whatever we want, but just grabbing the Secret Box is very, very important, and that's why we're playing the 4 copies. We're also playing 2 copies of Boss's Orders and 1 copy of Lana's Aid. I really like the 1 copy of Lana's Aid with Secret Box just because, you know, we can grab a couple different basic energies and some Tauros that are, you know, maybe already knocked out from our discard pile. So I really do like the 1 copy of Lana's Aid in this deck. So that's pretty much the entire deck except for the energy. We're playing 7 energy in this deck, 2 Rocky Fighting Energy and 5 basic Fighting Energy. You could go up to 4 Rocky Fighting Energy, but I'm only playing 2 just for consistency with Night Stretcher is really the main reason. Obviously, Rocky Fighting Energy only works if you put it on the Paldean Tauros, but it can prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to the fighting Pokemon this card is attached to, which obviously works really well with Paldean Tauros. So that's the entire main board, but there's a couple things I still want to talk about. I want to talk about tips and strategy for this deck. Maybe some things that if you haven't played this deck before and you're looking to, you know, play this at your locals or try to run this on the ladder, I just want to give a couple of general tips that maybe you didn't initially realize when playing this deck. So the first one I want to talk about is obviously, as I mentioned before, play the Ruins first. Getting risky Ruins on turn 1 is so important in this deck. If we don't, obviously, we have regular Tauros now as also a solid attacker, so in a pinch, if we need to not attack with Paldean Tauros, we can. But the difference between this deck going turn 1, like Secret Box, and then, you know, getting risky Ruins in play, putting a bunch of Tauros in, energy, and obviously if we're going second, and then we get a really, really big attack on our first turn, can be the difference between winning and losing the game. I can't tell you how many times I've donked my opponent with this on turn 1, or just in general, be able to pull a whole bunch of damage counters on our Tauros and swing for some massive attacks very, very quickly. So you're not necessarily having to mulligan for this, but keep this in mind. If your starting hand is a little weak or has a whole bunch of Tauros cards and no way to put damage counters on it, in that case, you'd have to use regular Tauros. But just really, really prioritize trying to get that risky Ruins in as quickly as you can. The second thing I want to go over is make sure you search for the right Tauros. There's been some situations in the late game where, you know, trying to decide what Tauros to grab can really mean a lot. So obviously you want to have a few different Paldean Tauros in play, at least 2, right? Our opponent gets a knockout, we can go ahead and get the next one ready to attack. But keep in mind, you know, with Fighting Gong, we can grab Paldean Tauros or a basic Fighting Energy. But with Pokeped, we can grab either Tauros. So in some situations, Pokeped, you might automatically assume, yeah, I just want to grab the Paldean Tauros. But sometimes it is right to just get another Tauros. We have a risky Ruins in place, so we put it into play, it gets the damage counters on it, and we can still do just as much damage. So kind of keep that in mind when you're playing this deck. Just think about what Tauros makes sense to grab in that particular situation. And then the last tip that I have, it's really simple. Paldean Tauros is the main attacker. This is what we're trying to do with this deck. The nice thing with the new Tauros from Chaos Rising is, although it is much, much better than the previous Tauros from Destined Rivals that we were using, it is not the main focal point of this deck. Again, if we get those hands where we have no support to put any damage counters on, we don't have the Secret Box, we don't have the risky Ruins or the Petrol to grab it, we can at least have a pretty solid attacker in its own right. But again, Paldean Tauros is what we want to do. We want to be attacking with this, at least if we're going second, we want to be able to attack on our first turn. But obviously if we're, you know, going first, we want to make sure we have a really, really nice attack setup on our next turn. It's really, really important in this deck. If you have a really good start, there's a good chance that you can win the game in just a couple of turns before our opponents can even set up. So overall with this deck, I really like it. It's so fun. And you want to know what? If you're, obviously on a specific budget, it's only $26 to build this entire deck, with most of the cost being the secret box and the Pheasantipity being like a couple dollars, but I know it did just get reprinted in that deck. So overall, this deck is mostly just a whole bunch of commons and uncommons, and if you play the TCG, you probably already have most of these cards like Night Stretcher and Fighting Gong and Pokepad. You probably already have all of them. If you're looking to build this deck and maybe you can't find some special red cards, or if they're a couple bucks each, you could really substitute this with a lot of different cards, to be honest with you. I mean, if you're looking, it's not really a good replacement for it because we're not playing Unfair Stamp, but tossing a couple extra Pokegears or something like that, or another Boss's Orders, it's pretty simple with this deck. But overall, it's really fun, it's really cheap, and I really do love the new addition with Tauros, just because it gives us a little bit of consistency that this deck definitely needs. So, at least for the wrap-up, I just wanted to talk about a couple things real quick. So, with Paldean Tauros, again, it's a fun single-prize deck, but don't expect to be necessarily moving mountains with this deck. But I can tell you that if you're watching this when this video first comes out, I'm going to be playing this on stream as soon as Chaos Rising releases on Pokemon TCG Live. So if this video's been out for a minute, you probably can go right to that video. I'll have the link right here on screen or in the description below if you want to go ahead and check that out. But overall, this was really fun to do my first Pokemon TCG Live deck tech, obviously after doing a whole bunch of Magic ones. So I was really excited to do this video today. And that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck list is in the description below if you'd like to check it out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Saronoki, Michael D, our premium channel member, The Common Cold, Jeremy P, BG Stilts, and Darren M. If you're interested in checking out other Pokemon TCG live videos on the channel, feel free to do so. There's a whole playlist that'll be on screen now. So that's all I've got for you. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Commander Crane, and I'll catch you in the next video.